Okay, and we are live. Hi guys, it's Frankie from Frankie Tech. Good to see you guys again, and I'm here with a very special live stream to invite to Frankie Tech one of my buddies, the man, the legend, Mr. Bill Marczak. How you doing, Bill?
Good to be here, Frankie. I'm doing excellent.
Yes, welcome to Frankie Tech, and of course, it's an honor to have you here, man, on the channel, and to be able to talk about something that is very kind of current, very relevant to the world we live in. Of course, as you know, we all have one of these, whether it's an Android phone or whether it's an iPhone, but we all have a phone in our pockets or in our midst, and so I think this is going to be a really great chat today, talking mobile security with Bill Marczak. And just to give you guys a little bit of an intro, Bill is a citizen research fellow. Is that correct?
A citizen lab at the University of Toronto.
Yeah. Citizen lab. That's right. And so we're going to let people stream in here. We got 8 viewers already, live viewers on Frankie Tech. But Bill, first I got to ask you, man, how have you been? I know it's been a pretty crazy couple weeks for you. How's it going, man?
Yeah, I mean it's going pretty well. You know, I'm trying as best I can to cope with the huge rush of interest following this iPhone 0 day, which I discovered and disclosed to Apple, who issued an emergency patch, iOS 14.8 last week. But yeah, it's been really busy. Lots of inquiries. You know, in this line of work that I'm in, where I'm, studying phone surveillance, I'm constantly getting people asking me, "Hey, Bill, did my phone get hacked? Is my phone compromised? What can I do to improve my digital security?" So there's lots of that, but hanging in there.
That is crazy. And just so you guys realize the magnitude of this, we're talking like not just hundreds of thousands of devices. We're talking like millions and millions of devices around the world. I mean, I got 14.8. Here's my iPhone, and I got 14.8 on it. And yeah, I was thinking about you when I was making that update. I was like, this one's for Bill. That's update.
Well, it's good that you updated, because the vulnerability that it fixed was very scary.
Yeah, so before we get started into the details, of course, of this crazy vulnerability that Bill was able to discover, let's start with an intro, Bill. So maybe a little bit of kind of backstory about yourself, and how did you get into all of this kind of world of security and looking for these vulnerabilities, and just the rundown story here, man.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say it's great to be here on your channel, Frankie Tech. I'm a big fan. I love your review style. I like the Frankie Street Tech. I think that's my favorite segment.
Yes.
So maybe in the future, when we're together in Hong Kong or something, I'll be able to make a cameo in one of your Frankie Street Tech reviews. But anyway, I'm honored to be on the channel. And so a bit of background about me. I started working in digital security when I was a PhD student in computer science at Berkeley. And I was studying something totally different. But then since I had gone to high school before my PhD in Bahrain, I was paying attention to political developments. And during my PhD, of course, the Arab Spring started. And protesters there started getting suspicious or dodgy emails and texts. And they thought, well, maybe these texts, maybe these emails, they're trying to get me to click on something to spy on me. So that's how I got my start, and how I started looking into this stuff and investigating this hacking and spyware stuff.
Wow, that's crazy, man. And just so you guys know, FYI, Bill has been one of these global citizens, kind of like me as well. Bill, you've grown up around the world. You were living in Hong Kong, of course, for even some time back in the day, and of course, being a part of that global network also, I think, made you more aware, right, of these types of potential security issues that may have popped up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I spent some time in Hong Kong. I moved there, I guess, in '96, right before the handover, and stayed there for a few more years. and then wound up going to high school in Bahrain in the Middle East, and then came back to the States for college and grad school. But certainly, living and growing up in these different places, one of the things that happens is you sort of feel, as you know, Frankie, you feel like at home in these places where you weren't necessarily born, or you're not part of the culture necessarily. So like for me in Hong Kong and me in Bahrain, I consider those to be, part of where I grew up. So it's part of my, basically my home. So when there's, unrest or, political troubles in these places, I'm trying to do my best to try and focus and see how I can help people. Because at the end of the day, it's all about just trying to help people who are at risk from these sorts of attacks and the sort of espionage on their devices. And I think, growing up overseas really helped me appreciate the fact that there's so many different cultures. Like there's different ways that people can be spied on. Different sorts of people are vulnerable. So it's really an interesting field to be working on.
That's awesome, man. And before we move forward here, I want to kind of welcome everyone who's in the chat here as well. Artsaurus, he says, "Hi, Frankie, Tech, and Bill. Thai fan here." Okay, very interesting. So, and we got a Thai fan for you there. Rolando, we got Michael. There's Rolando. There's Michael, and we got Luca Bello. He says, "Good job, guys. Amazing topic." And apparently, Lucas says, "Bill, I'm a world citizen like you guys, currently in South America. What is your point of views on de-Google phones?" And we'll talk about specific ones, but we'll definitely answer your question, Luca Bella. You're rocking a Pixel 4. Very nice. Good to have global citizens here on this chat. So yeah, we got John. We got a bunch of people in here, so this is great. So Bill, let's start talking about this, specifically this vulnerability, this massive vulnerability in the most basic of terms. Like for the most kind of common, or just kind of most basic understanding, if you can explain what it is and why this was such a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, so imagine for a second, you've got your iPhone and it's sitting on a table, in front of you. You're not really doing anything. You're not pushing anything. The phone's not unlocked. It's just locked on your lock screen. And 1 minute, all of your data is safe and secure on the phone. But the next minute, you don't see anything on the screen, nothing happens, but suddenly a person thousands of miles away gets access to your entire phone, can see your photos, can see your private messages, can even turn on the microphone and the camera to spy on activity around your phone. So basically, this was the vulnerability. It's known as a quote unquote zero-click vulnerability, because in order to activate this spying against your phone, you don't have to take any action as the owner of the phone, and you don't see anything. There's no pop-up to click on. There's no link. There's no attachment. There's no app you have to install. It's totally transparent to you as the target that this espionage and the spying is going on.
Wow, that's crazy, man. So in other words, this is not one of those where like it's like a phishing attack where you've clicked in and put in information, or where you've clicked a link. It literally just found your phone and was able to begin the spying without any input from you. That's kind of what I'm getting.
Exactly, yeah. And basically, in this case, the situation was that this exploit, this vulnerability, was sold to basically governments around the world, who then were able to use it to target whichever phones they wanted to. What they'd have to do is put in the phone number of the target, and then it would automatically be activated within a few minutes or less than an hour against the target phone. And it would do this based on a vulnerability inside iMessage.
Yeah, that is insane. Rolando, you kind of took my words out of my mouth. I never thought it's possible. That is crazy, man. That is absolutely, like, that's shocking. That's kind of like, that's super scary, especially because it's not anything that's like that essentially that you even would need to act upon. And it sounds like an extremely powerful tool. And so, like, talking about these kind of vulnerabilities, we're talking specifically about this one, but I know you've dealt with other ones in the past. Have you seen like the evolution of these? These are getting more sophisticated, or like, I guess, like, how do you begin to identify, where these vulnerabilities may be happening? Like, yeah, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, well, to answer your first question about sophistication, yeah, these things are definitely getting more sophisticated over the years. The first big iPhone vulnerability I found back in 2016, you actually had to click on a link in order to activate it. So basically, someone would send you a text message containing a link saying, oh, you have a package being delivered. Click on the link to track your package or to update the delivery. And then when you click on the link, it would take you to a web page that had an exploit that would take advantage of a vulnerability inside Safari on your iPhone and would use that to hack the phone and install the spyware. But of course, that, if you're a target, you can potentially notice that. You can say, this is a weird text message, like I didn't order anything. Why am I getting a tracking notification?
Yeah.
So you have some opportunity to notice and to avoid the surveillance in that case. But the big evolution is to this zero-click technique where there's just nothing to click on. It's a vulnerability inside iMessage itself. It's not in Safari. It's within iMessage. So it can be activated just by receiving the message, not having to click on anything or do anything on the phone. It's pretty scary.
That is crazy, man. That is crazy. I want to shout out Luca Bella. He just gave me a $10 super sticker, and he said, "You're welcome. I really enjoyed the topic, man." And so, yeah, Luca, this is, I really do appreciate that, man. And yeah, this is shocking stuff because it's like, it does sound like what you're saying is now it's just almost becoming a seamless process to be able for them to create these exploits. And then, once the tool exists, right, they're the governments of the world, the ones that want to do that kind of nefarious activity, then of course, that's going to be a very attractive piece of software, right? To be able to take advantage of, right? So it's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a matter of at the end of the day, the way I like to think about security is it's sort of about at least partially about cost. So you have to think about in terms of, well, how much do these hacking tools and these exploits, how much do they cost to develop, and how much do they cost to use? And that price will determine basically who is buying and using them. So right now they're expensive enough that pretty much it's only governments that have access to these sorts of tools. But of course, once they buy it, you would hope that in many cases there would be some oversight where before the government decides to target someone, they either go to a judge and get approval to take that action, or even after the fact, maybe there's someone who can look at the surveillance and investigate it to make sure it's being done according to the law. But honestly, some governments that they're selling this stuff to, the government can just choose to target someone without any sort of approval from a judge. So there's, in those cases, you get the tools being abused to target ordinary people.
That's crazy, man. Now we got a message here from Jay. Says, does this apply to only Google devices, specifically related to this vulnerability? This was an iPhone only vulnerability, right, Bill?
That's right. In this case, the specific vulnerability was for iPhone, but there's no reason to believe that there wouldn't be such another vulnerability for a Google phone.
Okay, wow, that's insane, man. And like you said, it's the cost of these are so pricey right now that governments are the only ones that can take advantage of them. But like if it were to evolve to the point where maybe like individuals would be able to use these, and that's really the scary point, because it's like then you're just talking about like organized crime, or you're talking about like just like really bad dudes out there who just want to use one of these things. It's and that Luca Bello, it says it affects all phones, not only iPhones. I mean, I can definitely imagine that this would be something that could eventually, you could find something like this that could affect other phones as well. But so going to the next part of the topic here, when we're talking about like identifying, right, Bill, these vulnerabilities, like what is the kind of the first step? Is it really just like, and related to the first step, how does the process then, as you kind of go forward, being able to get to the end point where you're like, okay, this is legit? Like maybe you can walk us through that.
Yeah, well, in general, there's a number of different ways you could go about discovering these things. I think what's really interesting about the stuff that I do and that my colleagues at Citizen Lab do, is we actually try and find this stuff by finding people who are getting targeted by it. So basically, we are working with people who are sort of members of civil society, journalists, activists, people, and we focus in certain areas. So we have a lot of contacts in the Middle East in particular. So you could imagine, like if you're a journalist in Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or one of these countries in the Middle East, often these sorts of journalists are targeted by the government, just to, the government wants to see what they're working on, what stories they're researching, who their sources are. So the government might hack their phones. And then if we as Citizen Lab are in touch with these people, we can examine their phones. So we can analyze the phone logs and look for indications that the phone was hacked. And in some cases, we're actually able to recover the specific code that is being used to hack the phones. It's rare, but this case with the iOS 14.8 update, that was caused because we actually got lucky and were able to recover pieces of the code that was used to hack this Saudi activist's phone.
Oh wow, that's insane, man. So like, in other words, it's not every time that you're able to do that, but like this one really was. You found a lot more, almost from like the forensic side of it, right? You found more of the actual code that was being used, whereas other times it's really just more kind of based on the experience or of the person. Or
well, timing is actually really important because this sort of hacking and the surveillance, it's not really something that is 24/7 or constant. It's more like they hack the phone and they're in the phone for a few hours and they get as much as possible. And then the spyware self-destructs, or, the hack goes away. Basically, it's only for a short period of time. So you've got to be very lucky, to get the forensics at just the right time where that spyware is still on the device and it hasn't self-destructed yet. It hasn't deleted yet. And of course, the reason they do the self-destruct and delete is to prevent researchers or others from getting a copy and disclosing it to Apple, and then Apple issues a patch, and then the spyware doesn't work until they find a new technique to hack.
Yeah, that's true. And I'll bring Luca's point here. Maybe I don't really get the tech jargon here, but Android is based on Java, so its core is more vulnerable than iOS. Have said that iOS is more of a target, is making 0 days for one phone is easier than dealing with Android fragmentation. So that does bring up a good point, and I think we had another question. Well, Jay asked earlier, it was like, does this apply to only Google devices? It's actually iOS we're talking about here, Jay. And but I guess that's a good point, like related to finding these. What is it that about like iPhone? Obviously, a lot of people use iPhones in the world, that versus maybe the fragmentation of Google that you guys kind of focus mostly on iPhone right now.
Yeah, well, that's a great point about the fragmentation, because if you think about it, like how many iPhones are out there? Like in terms of number of devices, there's maybe a billion iPhones out there in the world, right? And if you're able to find, and they're all running iOS. There's no, maybe some people jailbreak the device and install like a custom ROM or something, but pretty much all of the devices are running iOS. Whereas with Android devices, maybe you have some running stock Android, maybe you have some running the Samsung flavor, the Xiaomi flavor, like all the different flavors of modifications and spins of Android out there. So if you find a bug against iOS, some way to exploit iOS, it's much easier, to exploit that against a far larger number of devices. Like if you find iOS with the same vulnerability, you can use against maybe a billion devices. Where if you find like a Xiaomi vulnerability, well, maybe you get, I don't know how many devices do they have, like maybe tens of millions. Yeah, so it's much more valuable to have the iPhone, I think.
That's right. Awesome, man. I mean, well, and that makes sense. Yeah, because like, all using the same software, you can definitely just do that with one, with Apple, one piece of software. Rolando saying, I think this topic reached Apple. If I'm not mistaken, they're well aware of this issue. Is there a way for this somehow to be prevented? And also that, brings up the question, from the Apple side, like, are these like, is there anything that they are doing to try to like improve it, or is this just like the natural, issue with software, that there's always going to be some sort of a little gap when they make new software? Like, for example, I just got iOS 15
Yeah.
updated on my phone, and I'm sure all of a sudden now, it's a great software, by the way, guys, very nice, but maybe now this has opened up a bunch of new potential vulnerabilities. Maybe you can speak to that part of it. It's like, what is Apple doing, and is there anything they can do?
Well, certainly, yeah. Every new iOS release brings new features, and with new features, you have the potential for new bugs. But Apple is aware of this sort of issue, and I think their main approach is to introduce new what they call mitigations. So rather than trying to go out and find each and every individual bug that's being used, they try and introduce a mitigation which will make a whole class of bugs obsolete, basically. So like one of the things they did with iOS 14 is they introduced this framework called Blast Door, which is supposed to make parsing of iMessages safer. But of course, after they released it, this new exploit came out for iOS 14, so it got around their Blast Door mitigation. So it's an arms race back and forth. Apple will introduce a mitigation, the attackers will come up with a new exploit that gets around the mitigation, and it probably will go on and on like this for some time.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, it sounds to me like you said, like 14.8 was so secure after this, but I mean, I guess now I almost from a security standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, I don't regret updating, but now it is true that I may have just opened myself up to other potential issues. This is a pretty controversial one. I don't want to go too in depth on this, but Jay saying, don't you think this could also have positive effects on national security and provide critical evidence against criminals? So, there's obviously the other side of it. And I know the group in question you're talking about, right? They say like, oh, but we're doing it for good, and it's like, oh, it's trying to help, so you can find the bad guys, this and that. Like, but how does that, I guess, play into this trying to almost like a justification, right, of these types of tools, even though they can also be used in really nefarious ways as well?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I mean, I tend to think, like, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong or inherently bad about the tools themselves. It's really just about how the tools are used, and the way that you can ensure the tools are only used to go after criminals and terrorists and things like that, is to have some sort of oversight of the surveillance. So, in many countries, before the police or the intelligence services can spy on someone, they have to go to a judge and get a court order or a warrant. And then any sort of surveillance that is undertaken can be reviewed at a later point. Like there could be, in the US, like we have the Congressional Intelligence Committee or various committees in Congress, which can exercise oversight over law enforcement and intelligence. So I think it's really all about the oversight. But what's unfortunate is that the companies that make these tools often sell to governments where they don't have very good oversight. So governments where some dude can just decide, oh, I want to spy on this journalist. I don't have to go to a judge. I don't have to tell anybody about it. I'm just going to type in the number and click spy, and that's all it is. So I think that's the real issue.
Yeah, that is so true, man. And so the tool itself is just a tool, right? It's like this piece of software, this code, and how it's used is really like the main question here. So like, I think that it's a very, very sensitive topic, but it also is really the reason why these things are so powerful, and they can be probably used, imagine, to thwart some crazy attack, but at the same time, they could also be used for bad things too. So this is kind of more of a general question, but I think this is one that you guys in the audience will be probably more interested in, is how secure is a phone truly? How secure is a phone? And I said iPhone versus Android here because let's face it, this vulnerability was about iPhone, but I've obviously got a lot of Android users here in the audience. Frankie Tech, as you know, we cover a lot of Xiaomi, a lot of Android phones. I mean, people sometimes ask me the question like, oh, should I be worried about buying this brand of phone because I'm worried that maybe it's being used to spy. You have the issue of Huawei, right? Which like the government banned and all this stuff because like they thought, oh, there was a backdoor to these phones. So ultimately, kind of a more general question, Bill, how secure is a phone really?
Well, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
I think like most things, security is sort of a relative term, and you have to define it with respect to secure against what. Like often we think about, well, we have some data, some communications on our phones which we want to keep private, and then the answer is, well, who do we want to keep it private from? And that really factors into security. So if you're a business and you want to have confidential discussions with your colleagues and you don't want a competitor business to be able to spy on you, well, then I think phones are probably pretty secure. You probably don't have to worry about your competitor using this sort of like zero-click hacking technique just because it's so expensive and exclusive at the moment. So you don't have to worry about that sort of attack. Whereas, if you're, a journalist that's worried about the government spying on you, then yeah, it is sort of, something you have to worry about. And then maybe for that case, you say the phone's not really that secure. But I think for most people, the phones are, secure enough for what most people are concerned about. They're probably concerned about, well, their financial information, credit card numbers, that sort of stuff. And in general, phones are fairly secure for that. So I don't think people need to panic. Most people should feel very good about the security of their devices.
Yeah. And do you think like in the experience of like, because obviously you've used iPhones for a lot of this, but like, for example, Google, like you have Pixel, you have like, Google is a software. They're obviously very different, but like generally, would you say like whether it's Android or iOS, like for the regular consumer, most of the time it's generally like pretty similar experience? Or would you say the iPhone is maybe in some ways a bit more secure? I mean, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a great question. Obviously with Android, we've already sort of talked about like the fragmentation issue, but another issue with Android is that a lot of the phones don't receive updates for a very long period of time after you buy them. So like maybe you'll buy the Android phone and you'll only get updates for 2 years. And it's not a problem if you're, if you're like Frankie Tech and constantly like changing devices and, getting the latest, hottest tech. But if you might keep your phone, if you're a person who tends to keep their phone for like, 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, then yeah, it is a consideration that you'll have to worry about maybe is, well, what if my phone stops getting security updates? Then there'll be a bunch of, bugs out there that everybody knows about that my phone's not protected against. So people can use those against me. Whereas if for iPhones, the typical period of support from Apple is much longer. Like they'll give you updates for maybe 4 years or 5 years on your iPhone. It's pretty standard. So if you're the kind of person who wants to have a device for like a really long time, I'd say probably go for an iPhone just because you'll be getting those latest security updates for longer.
That's right. So Bowie, there's no Android phone. You got to get the iPhone, man. there's no. I don't think there's any such thing as a no virus, device, like a device that won't be vulnerable at some point. So I think security, especially for Android, and that's kind of why I always gripe about like a lot of the China manufacturers, like Xiaomi's doing a much better job of it now, and they definitely have improved a lot. But for the smaller guys, they don't do the Android security patches, and like they'll be delayed or they'll be outdated by like months, maybe even a year. And once that's the case, then really it's going to open season right to that phone to like anyone who want to get into them. So yeah, man, it's a really good point. Of course, this is in no way tied with the recent iPhone 13 pre-orders and release schedule. Like get an iPhone and a brand new one is on the way. But yes, I have pre-ordered my iPhone. It will be arriving on Friday. So we got Michael Pepper Tech. Michael Peppertech, what kind of a question is that? I like larger phones because when I hold them, the massive girth makes me feel insecure. You win the joke of the day, Michael Peppertech. But in a more serious question, he says, Apple's gone to security updates for devices that can't update to the newest version of iOS now to iOS 12.5.2, for example, and they pushed 14.8 for those who weren't ready for iOS 15. That is correct. And that is a good point, is the iPhones do get older, right? They get stuck on a software and they can't upgrade anymore. And that's probably the time you'd recommend for someone to then maybe consider upgrading, right?
Yeah, I think so. And based on my experience, from what I've seen with iPhones, it's usually like around 4 or maybe even 5 years in some cases that you'll still be able to install the latest version. Now, maybe it'll slow down your phone a little bit if you have like an iPhone 7 or something trying to run, the latest version of iOS. But if it still is available, then it'll give you the sort of same sort of protection that the security updates give all the other iPhones. So that I think is one advantage, just, that you get that longer period of support. And also, as you pointed out, Frankie, the more predictable updates, like you don't have to wait a couple months, worried that you're out of date while your manufacturer tries to roll out the security update.
Exactly. Rolando, I think we're just general question here, but he's saying it's used only for good purposes, but it's scary to think maybe used for personal financial information because it can happen, right? And I think that's really the point. It's like, ultimately, like, would you guys at Citizen Lab, for example, would you be able to notice if all of a sudden there was more of a proliferation of this type of tool? Would that be something where that you guys would be able to like, or is it very specific based on the kind of the individuals you're working with, like, or would there be some way to figure that out? Do you think if all of a sudden tools did start becoming more prevalent?
Well, that's actually a really good question. So for those of you, your viewers who are familiar with, like let's say Windows laptops or desktops, typically you might install an antivirus program on those. And one sort of little known feature actually of many antivirus programs is that these antivirus programs are feeding back information on threats to the antivirus company. So like, you download these like free antivirus, like Avast free antivirus or something. Yeah. Well, how is that free? Why is that free? Well, it's because, you're opting into shared data on threats with this central company, and the central company then has visibility into threats on, millions of devices where their antivirus software runs. So that's called a telemetry. And there's a lot of telemetry from desktop computers, but there's really not from phones. And I think that's where, to your question about, well, if, someone started using this technique to hack, millions of people and steal their financial information, would anybody realize it? Maybe, but also maybe not, because there's not this sort of centralized telemetry. Like you can't install an antivirus program on your iPhone that gathers this telemetry. Like Apple very, very tightly limits what apps can do. They can't do what antivirus on your PC can do. So basically there's very little telemetry from phones. So there wouldn't really be an indication like that. I mean, obviously, maybe people would start reporting like, oh, my financial information got stolen, and then someone would investigate. But, aside from observing that sort of side effect, it would be really hard to detect any sort of mass exploitation.
Gotcha, man. And Michael, with another good kind of point here, aren't account attacks more prevalent versus device hacks, i.e. T-Mobile getting hacked, easier to gain mass access because it's not device specific? So yeah, that would seem like more the type of thing you hear in the news where they say, oh, like, T-Mobile hack, or like, oh, the whatever Sony, like there's these big kind of pieces of software, right, that are hacked, that then people, so like that's kind of more the challenge, right, from a consumer level, you would say, versus like one of these tools being used.
Yeah, I think the average consumer, their main experience with hacking is going to be hearing about things like the recent huge T-Mobile breach, where I guess I forget how many millions of like social security numbers and credit card numbers and stuff were stolen by a hacker. I think that's going to be the main experience for most people, is these large breaches of centralized databases. But of course, also account compromise. And we've been seeing this with people in the cryptocurrency community, right? There'll be takeovers of people's phone numbers to try and get the two-factor authentication texts, and then try and steal, like break into cryptocurrency wallets and steal cryptocurrency. So that's sort of, like account-based, like trying to take over the number, re-register the phone number, or break into the email account or something like this is, I think, much more common for the average user, because it's pretty easy to do that compared with hacking into an iPhone. Like at the end of the day, you just have to convince someone to give up their password or socially engineer someone into porting a phone number. Like doesn't require a huge amount of technical knowledge.
Yeah, that's right, man. And boy, this is a pretty, I think a lot of people do ask this, like Apple versus iPhone, side-loading apps, good for users or just being mean. But like, I think the point is really like, because the iPhone is more closed off, right? You don't have that openness of Android to be able to side load stuff or have a different app store. And this is pretty relevant to like the court ruling that just passed, right, with Apple. Like they needed to obviously they won in many ways, but they also need to adjust and allow for other ways of payment. And maybe in the future there may be like rulings that happen where they're like, you need to open up the phone, you need to make it more open like that. So like that's another point, right, to think about though, from a consumer standpoint, right, is how closed or how open is the system. There are pros and cons to that as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so as an example with Android sideloading, we used to see this technique back, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where attackers would try and convince or try and socially engineer a target into sideloading a malicious APK on the phone, saying like, oh, well, this is the new updated version, or this provides like exclusive content or something like this, and they try and get the target to sideload the app, which would do something malicious. But on the other hand, it's great to have competition in terms of apps and app stores. So it's really like one of those things that's hard to weigh. Like speaking just from a pure security point of view, I think it's good to prevent sideloading, because it prevents users from shooting themselves in the foot. But honestly, from like a competition and functionality point of view, I would prefer it to be able to sideload things onto my iPhone and to have more competition in terms of who can offer apps and who can provide platforms for content.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, this has been super, super great. And as we're going to move to the final section now, and I called it Mobile Security 101. So anyone here in the chat, if you're hearing and if you're watching this, after the fact, I think this is a key part here. What are the things that we can do as, users, but ultimately as it relates to the work that you've done, man? Like, what is it? What are the things you can do to make your phones more secure? Like when we're talking about like either VPNs or talking about like, just like where you live or like your circumstance, and how would someone, if they did feel something was going on with their phone, like how could they reach out to you guys, or like how does that work, like that you're able to do that?
Yeah, well, I can give some sort of general advice, and then we can wait and take some questions from the viewers here. I think the best advice, there's sort of like a few key points that are pretty easy for most people to do and will increase security fairly dramatically, both for phones and for your online accounts. And I think the first one is two-factor authentication. So getting on your phone, one of these apps like Google Authenticator or Duo or whatever two-factor authenticator app is compatible with your online accounts, and set that up. So set it up so you require a two-factor code to sign into your Gmail, to sign into your Facebook, your Twitter, your YouTube, all of your Instagram, all of your important social media accounts, because that account compromise can be really, really deadly. And the second thing I'd suggest is, in terms of your phones, make sure that you have a good passphrase or password on the phone, because in a lot of cases, just sort of your average everyday circumstances, maybe you might misplace your phone or lose your phone. And then someone who can, guess your 4-digit passcode, well, they've got all of your, all of your information. And most people choose passcodes which are like, 1, 2, 3, 4, or just down the middle, or, some common pattern that's easy to guess. So I would say, try and choose a stronger passcode. I think iPhones require 6 digits now. And you can even have an alphanumeric password. It still works with Face ID and Touch ID, but for those cases where Face ID or Touch ID is disabled, you can have a much stronger alphanumeric password to secure your phone.
I'm just gonna say one thing, Bill. I will admit I'm using still a 4-digit passcode because of this chat right now, man. I will be changing my passcodes for my iPhones, man. So I'm sorry. I haven't been practicing good security etiquette, but you are right. I do use two-factor, but so you said two-factor and a better security code. And was there any other kind of general thing that people can do before I can bring in Michael Pepper, because he's got some good questions here?
Yeah, well, so you briefly alluded to and mentioned VPNs, and there's actually not to be a shill for Apple or anything here, but there is a new interesting feature in the new iOS called Private Relay, which basically is sort of like a VPN. If you subscribe to like the cheapest iCloud plan, it's a VPN that's like built into your iPhone, and will route your traffic basically through Cloudflare and other services to disguise your source IP address and encrypt your traffic if it's not encrypted. Although most web traffic these days is encrypted, so that'll provide like a little bit more security and a little bit more privacy, I think, for many users. So that's something to consider. Of course, there's also VPNs that what are the popular ones these days, like ExpressVPN or Proton VPN or one of those. Actually, there was a really interesting, if you follow sort of, like surveillance news, there was a really interesting tidbit in the news last week. And the interesting tidbit was that the chief technical officer of one of these big VPN companies, I think it was ExpressVPN, used to work as like a hacker for the United Arab Emirates government in the Middle East. So there were some questions being raised. I mean, obviously the company said, well, look, we hired him because he's been a hacker, so he knows how to secure our systems. But then there's also people saying, well, maybe they, there's some relationship there with, some intelligence agency or something like that. It's hard to know just based on the fact of this person working there, but it sort of raises the possibility. And I think it's the question that people should be asking themselves, like, who is this VPN company that I'm buying the service from? Because I'm sending all of my internet traffic to them. Do I trust the company? And the advantage with like the iCloud Private Relay is, well, it's Apple. You probably trust them more than you trust like some random VPN company you've never heard of.
All right, well, that's good, man. I'm canceling my ExpressVPN. No, well, look, it's funny enough because I actually do use ExpressVPN, but now that you mentioned this, and that's not related to any company in particular, but when Apple, I bought services that Apple didn't do before, and then once they've added that feature into their software, then I just stopped using that service. So like, it's good to know that now there's like an in-house kind of solution that I can use. And Gail, you're saying how secure is a phone using VPNs? Generally, I think they're pretty secure, right? VPNs as a software, as a way to do it. But
yeah. In general, they're pretty secure. Just with the caveat that be sure, or convince yourself that you are okay with the company that you're buying it from. Like convince yourself, like do some research, like figure out who they are, like where are they based, what laws do they have to comply with. And for most users, the average user, it should be fine. They're not going to be, VPNs are not going to be like skimming credit card numbers en masse from their users. Like they would go out of business so fast, skimming private data from the internet traffic. So they're not going to do that, but there could be risks for users who, might be targeted by some government or something like this.
All right, man. That is very, very helpful info, man, on how we can be more secure in the general sense. I'll just take a few questions from Michael. He says, does Tesla require renewal of registering of apps for beta testing for security purposes, since essentially it's allowing apps that aren't through the App Store? That's an interesting question there.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with test flight specifically, but I can tell you there's a wide range of ways that you can actually install apps on the iPhone, which are not technically in the App Store. A lot of them are pretty cumbersome and tough. So like you can install like a mobile configuration profile on your phone, which allows you to sideload apps, or you can buy like the $99 a year Apple developer certificate and sign an app and load it onto a small number of phones. Or some enterprises can buy an enterprise cert and sign apps and install them on phones. But in general, Apple keeps a pretty tight lock on that to make sure. Like there was a case, I think, where Facebook was distributing a beta version of their app, not in the Apple App Store, but it was using their Facebook enterprise certificate, and Apple dropped the hammer on them. They said, Facebook, we're going to kick you out of the App Store unless you stop doing this. Like they're really serious about, just keeping things through the App Store.
Wow, that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
And another quick question from Michael is, isn't there an issue for two-factor and password managers because they have to prove trustworthy for the average consumers who's new to those things? And I mean, a lot of these are now, like, I mean, for Apple, for example, it's built in, right? Google's is built in. So like generally seems like we kind of recommend going for the company, the in-house type of solutions over maybe third-party solutions for that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, so third-party solutions might be useful in some cases, but in general, I think most people are going to have good luck with the Chrome built-in password manager, or the Safari password manager, or this sort of stuff where it saves it in the iCloud keychain or the Google Chrome keychain. That I think is going to be pretty good for most people. But there are, some people might have complicated situations where they're syncing passwords across different devices and different browsers. Yeah. And in those cases, there's things like, LastPass or other paid services like that. But in general, I think most people are going to have good mileage with like the free Chrome or Safari ones.
Yeah, and that's exactly related to what Bo is asking about. Good apps that will secure your password without leaking. So LastPass, those kind of ones. And I think, the in-house ones are good too. And Michael Pepper says Google has their own. If you have a Google One subscription, kind of related to the VPNs as well. So, oh shit! Thank you for very informative time to cancel my subscription to NordVPN. Well, I think it's all this is all good info, and I guess the main point is doing your research about the tools that you're using to secure your mobile security 101 and to make sure that it is safe. So. So Bill, I mean, to kind of wrap up here, man, what is like, if there's some final takeaways you want to share with the audience here, and we can answer a few last questions, but what are the final takeaways that you want people to know about what you're doing, and most importantly though, like why it's important for that this type of stuff continue to be discovered, as we kind of move further along with just getting more and more into our phones, into our technology, like. Yeah, maybe kind of share some thoughts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the reason why it's important to study, the sort of work that I do and that Citizen Lab does to try and study these threats against activists and journalists is because it all ties in back to the price, like how expensive is it to do this surveillance and hacking. And right now, this is really within the reach of governments only. But if researchers don't dig into this and don't uncover this stuff, then the market is just going to keep growing. The stuff is going to become more popular and cheaper, and it's going to be within the reach of more and more attackers. So I think that's, in my view, why it's important to study these specific, at-risk targeted communities, because if you can detect the threats and get Apple to fix them or get Google to fix them or whoever, then it becomes more expensive and more costly to develop this, because there's less supply of these sorts of exploits and vulnerabilities. So that's how I think about it. It's like the work that I do and that Citizen Lab does. It's try and raise the cost of these attacks to make them really, truly very rare, and to try and make it so that most people don't need to worry about and be concerned about this stuff. And indeed, I think most of your viewers can sleep well at night knowing that they're not going to be directly targeted with something like this. But I think it's also important not to just focus necessarily on your own personal security, but to think about the community that you're in. Because if one person in your circle of friends or one person in your community gets hacked or targeted or has bad security, that can compromise everyone else. because maybe they have copies of, your communications.
Yeah.
Maybe someone can take over their accounts and target you or other people. So it's really about the community aspect, I think, and just, keeping that in mind, that maybe your security is good and your security is fine, but you also have to be thinking about other people you're dealing with, other people, your friends, your family, your loved ones.
That's such a great point, man. And a great way to kind of wrap up, like all of this in a nutshell, man. And I got to say, man, congrats on this amazing, finding this, exposing this. And, I just imagine that. I remember that moment when I saw 14.8 come up and being like, this one's for Bill, because this really was, even though, like you said, it's not something that directly affects like every consumer, but like everyone that morning in the office was like, we better update, you better update. Doesn't even matter, because it was like, it became such a big story that even though it almost none of us would be affected, but it's like something we all are a part of, and it's pretty crazy. And I guess Bowie has few last things here. He said, using beta apps or stable apps, which are better? Instagram does have beta versions and stable at the same time. So that's something I never thought about, like beta apps versus stable apps. What's the difference, or does it matter?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to think which, there's certain arguments, I guess, to be made either way. Generally, what I would say is that maybe using beta would be slightly more secure because it's less common. Like, you'd have fewer people, and this gets back to the idea of, well, if you have like a billion devices running iOS, you come up with an iOS exploit, you can attack those billion devices. But how many people on iOS are running like iOS beta, iOS release candidate? So if you're designing an attack, maybe you don't focus on the beta, maybe you just focus on the actual released versions. But again, it's more theoretical. I would say that, in principle, there's not really a huge difference, but maybe a little bit more security on the beta because it's less common.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good point, man. And I typically don't. I used to install like the betas and stuff. Like, on the iOS, it's a bit different, but like I don't. I generally just like when it's ready to update, and like I never do like beta software of like actual apps. I just like update through the App Store and stuff. So, but that's a great point. And he said, Bruno person, yeah. So there's some dude who was like giving me crap about like this topic or something. I blocked him. He's probably one of those jerks trying to get into your phones, man. So screw him. The rest of Frankie Tech Army's here, and probably we'll be checking it out at their better times. But besides that, man, it's been a real awesome chat, Bill. And I think, security wise, I know I'm picking up the new iPhone this week, so I just throw out a little grab bag here. What phone are you using right now, man? I think people would be curious to find out.
Well, so actually, little tiny security tip is I actually use multiple phones. So right now, my main phone here is actually an iPhone SE2. This is the one that came out, I guess it was last year.
Yeah, that's right.
Mid 2020, like sort of a cheaper option than the iPhone 11. And then I've got my second phone here is a Google Pixel 4, I think it is.
Nice. That's right.
And then I have like a couple other phones that I use from time to time, like a burner phone when I'm traveling or something like that. But I think it's good to try as much as possible to like segregate your activity onto different phones, especially if you're a high risk person. Maybe the average person could have like one work phone and one home phone, but if you're higher risk, you can be even more compartmentalized than that.
Wow, that's crazy, man. That's crazy that in some way, because of your work, you've ended up kind of like Frankie Tech. Too many phones. Too many phones. What does it do with all these phones, man? And by the way, I don't know, Nick, if you're watching, Nick, this is your phone. I got your consumption vouchers here, bro. You better use them. Inside joke. Sorry, guys. The point is, Paul says, I thought burner phones are just movie stuff. No, I guess not, man. I guess they are. They can be for real, as you said, Bill. And it's crazy in some way that you've ended up with multiple phone lifestyle similar to that. So we just got a few kind of wrap ups here. Say Michael Pepper texting, awesome stream, Frankie and Bill. That is great. John, thanks for the privacy talk, Bill Frankie. I know a lot about privacy. So there you go. Even if we touched but a few people, but I mean, look, we have even up to 20 guys, 20 people in the chat, and it's been kind of constant. So, but this has been great, and hopefully more people can kind of tap into this chat, and they can look for this chat, and we can share this chat because this is going to be on Frankie Tech, and we'll do that. So to wrap up, Bill, maybe just tell us, just to kind of wrap up once again, if anyone wants to find your work, where they can kind of find you and kind of do more deep dive into the world of mobile security and security, tech security in general.
Yeah. So I'd recommend, if you want to check out what I'm up to and what Citizen Lab is up to, all of our stuff is basically on our website, citizenlab.ca, which is, you can go there and check out our latest reports. I'd also like to give a shout out to some other groups which are doing similar work to Citizen Lab. Amnesty International, if you're familiar with them, they have a division called Amnesty Tech that does really interesting work on the same sort of stuff. Also, the Electronic Frontier Foundation here in San Francisco, they have a team at EFF that does similar sort of work to this. So all three organizations, Citizen Lab, Amnesty Tech, EFF, good to follow. Most of the stuff is on our websites or our Twitter accounts. And of course, you got to follow Bill, Mr. @Bill Marczak on Twitter. Let's get those followers up, and most importantly, having this conversation is super important, and I think it's relevant at any point, during the year, especially right now with new iOS 15 coming out, with new phones coming out, people are kind of switching around, and just in general, this kind of, we're in the tech season, right? So people are getting new devices, people are kind of learning more about this kind of stuff, and I think it's super awesome. We'll wrap it up here with Rolando. Wish to see more of you and Bill in the future. Funny enough, guys, if you may or may not have seen this video back in the day, I did a trip to Apple Park. It was this fun video I did, and you may have remembered my man Bill. He was the man who brought me to Apple Park, and we had a fun day there checking out the campus. So if you haven't seen that one, go look it up. Frankie Visits Apple Park. And that was the last time we met up, man. It's been crazy. It's been too long.
It's been too long, man. And we definitely need to do something about it. So hopefully I'll be able to come and meet you, and we can hang out, go check out some great spots in San Francisco, man. It's in my name. It's in my name, Francisco. So got to do it, man. But Bill, this has been awesome. I hope you enjoyed this chat. We're hitting exactly 1 hour here, so it's perfect time. Thanks for stopping by, Crew Elite. Thank you so much. And once again, guys, to deep dive, if you want to go learn more about Bill's work and everything that's going on in this world, that's the right website, right? Citizenlab.ca.
Yeah. Yep.
There you go, guys. I'm going to leave that up as we wrap up here. But once again, thank you for everyone who jumped in, who stopped by this security talk with Bill Marczak. Of course, just one disgruntled person, but otherwise has been a very smooth, beautiful experience. To all you guys, Josh, John, Bowie, Rolando, Crew Elite, Michael Peppertech, Gail, all you guys, Luca, thank you once again for the beautiful chat there, sticker, and to everyone else who joined. And most importantly, to you, Bill, thank you so much, man, for making the time. It truly was an honor to have you here on Frankie Tech.
Well, thanks for having me. I had a great time. Okay,
awesome, man. And I guess we'll wrap up with the classic Frankie Tech outro. If we want to do it together, I can do it too. It's okay. This is Frankie Tech signing off.
And Bill signing off.
Oh, yes. Have a good one. All right, take care, guys. So long.